Every single person I think who works with the non-speakers with autism will say telepathy is the tip of the iceberg. That is the thing you hear over and over and over again. So many of the families who have a non-speaker are already fighting a war on so many fronts. Doctors tell the families when they're little, they'll never speak. There's often the sense that this individual's locked inside. Well, what's happened is that some families take a chance. The telepathy, the sense that something is going on, the mind reading has been there all along, but spelling gives you a way to validate it. It feels so out there. The only reason I can say it out loud is because it's happened so often. All truth goes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. Third, it's accepted as self-evident.
Where are we at on that spectrum here?
At the simplest form, truly being present and loving someone and sitting with them and believing in them, that you are competent, you are in there. I don't care what the doctors are telling me that you're not. I don't believe them. That changes lives. It changes what you're capable of. And it also can turn on these gifts.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Know Thyself. Our guest today is an award-winning documentarian who is known for tackling complex social issues. And last year in 2024, she created something called the Telepathy Tapes, which if you haven't heard, has been a sort of a cultural zeitgeist and is very exciting. It's exploring the complex inner dimension of nonverbal autistic children and goes fast beyond into challenging our paradigm and notion of consciousness and what this life in reality really fundamentally is. Kai Dickens, thank you for being here.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. In your beautiful studio that I'm jealous of.
Yeah, I'm gonna help you for season 2, season 3, maybe.
We're gonna level up here and do visuals coming in the next year or so.
Your audio is clean though. It's been such a joy to dive into the studies, the season 1 of Telepathy Tapes, and it is something that I've just heard. So, I mean, you've probably heard this so much, but it's just been so culturally talked about, and it's so exciting to feel a collective sense of awe and wonder about what life is again for so many people. I thought a cool gateway drug, so to speak, into this whole world could be speaking about Savant children, Savant syndrome.
Yeah.
As this has been well documented and known and validated for decades, and so. For people that don't know, what is Savant syndrome and what have been a couple interesting examples of it that you've seen?
Sure. Yeah. Savant syndrome is basically a case where someone has an unbelievable knowledge or, expertise around something that they haven't really ever been exposed to, or maybe haven't been taught in a really formal way. So there's different types of like savants: calendar computation, art, language, music, math. Those are kind of the most known savants. We're actually doing a whole episode on savants in season 2 that aren't non-speakers, which we'll talk about in a second. And some of the most fascinating savants to me are acquired savants, which are people who have an accident or are hit on the head, something, kind of tragic happens.
Lightning strike.
Yeah. And after the accident, they have an unbelievable ability that wasn't there before. So, I don't want to, I'm not going to say his name quite yet, but in season 2, we spent some time interviewing a man who was hit on the head after leaving work one day. He was mugged. And after that, he could see math everywhere. And it was unbelievable because the math was really informing him of knowledge around the universe. And he had such a complex understanding. And a lot of the equations that all of a sudden he was aware of, he could draw. Like he understood how the equation would look if he could make it physical. And so he was drawing all these pictures. He started taking many, many calculus classes, and almost no one could keep up with him and what he was saying until AI came around. And he started teaching AI the formulas and what he was seeing around the world. And it was spitting back the pictures that he had been drawing. So it was very clear that what he was gathering was correct. And it's fascinating because it really, for me, it explores, well, what is consciousness if you could have a head injury and you're suddenly capable of something you weren't prior? And so I think how this goes full circle into the non-speakers with the unbelievable spiritual gifts that we explore in the Telepathy Tapes is many, there's been a few scientists, starting with Bernie Rimland, later on with Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell, who've said, look, ESP, extrasensory perception, is something you shouldn't have access to. You haven't been taught, very much like other savant skills. Why don't we consider this a savant skill instead of shunning it or saying it sounds so silly? Because science overwhelmingly has accepted other savant skills. They don't know how they come to be. They don't know why they come to be. It's a mystery, yet it's not something that we dismiss. We say, okay, there's a big question mark here, but it's really happening. So the thought is, should ESP, and which ESP is something like, precognition, telepathy, remote viewing, be considered a savant skill as well?
It's interesting living in a culture that really values the intellect and logic as the premier source of intelligence. And it can be hard to externally validate someone's internal experience. But when you have these examples of kids like Daniel, which I think you referred to in the telepathy tapes, that can recite over 22,500 decimal points of pi without error, and Ramsey, who can speak or read over 8 languages at the age of 2,
Yeah.
and these immense musical capabilities, like it's clearly it rewrites our notion of what is information and how can we have access to it instead
Yeah.
of this top-down way of learning that we're used to.
Yeah.
And I think it really does open up exploring, okay, we don't know what this is. We can use labels and terms and words to kind of understand what these different things are. But then as it translates to diving deeper into your work with the telepathy tapes and
Mhm.
exploring these various studies and examples of non-speaking autistic children that are displaying very similar things and ESP capabilities, and we have a lot to dive into. So as it translates and you started exploring
Mhm.
and finding this work, I would love for you just to take us back a little bit to the moment when you first started to discover that this was more widespread than we think it is, and then going into your first study or example.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. And, I first heard about this whole world through a podcast where Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell was featured talking about the work she'd previously done testing non-speakers with autism and finding that they could seemingly read their parents' or teacher's mind. And she would put a partition up. The parent would be on one side, or the teacher, whoever, and was being shown a number, a word, a fake word. And on the other side of the partition, the non-speaker was able to accurately and very, very high accuracy, like above 97%, type what the person was seeing. And she done multiple tests, and she had been educated at Harvard and Johns Hopkins. I mean, Johns Hopkins was where she was educated. She taught at Harvard, like she was a real scientist. And I was fascinated. So, I contacted her, and she introduced me to a fresh family, someone she had never tested before. And I was very skeptical and wanted to really kind of be in charge of the test. I found the space, I booked the crew, I bought the cues, I set up, downloaded the random number generator, and we did the first test, and it was mind-boggling. And this was a new speller that we were testing. So she was still in the phase of spelling where she had to have a little bit of touches on her shoulder, her head. And I don't think anyone in the room would say, oh, yeah, there was Morse code happening between someone and her. But Dr. Powell was like, it will never hold up for science just because of touch. So go see this other young individual who's not touched at all, Akil, who can spell independently into a iPad across the room. And after seeing that, I think my mind was absolutely blown wide open. So I started reaching out to families and putting up my own inquiries around the internet, and just diving deep into this and finding there had been many books written about this. And they were, not very popular on Amazon because, no one really knew about this phenomenon. But there had been many, many books. There had been articles. This has been reported for a long time. I was introduced to a teacher in Wisconsin who had been videotaping this phenomenon 30 years ago, sending out VHS tapes to, scientists saying, can you please look at this? These children are able to accurately tell you what word I put on a Scrabble board from a different room. If I hold a color over their head, they can tell you what it is. And so I thought, my gosh, this is happening all over. It's just no one's like really put the dots together. And then I think, as you start to meet families and teachers who are experiencing this and kind of start to build trust, then they opened up their world further and further until I started realizing this is in England, this is in Israel, this is in India, this is in Africa, this is in Mexico. It was all over, and it's widespread. And I think for me, when I started really talking to a lot of teachers and spelling communication partners who work with non-speaking individuals, almost every single one of them said, look, if you work with this population, you know this. It's just the best kept secret because it who is going to believe it? It's so hard to believe. And so many of the families who have a non-speaker are already fighting a war on so many fronts. Like just for time, for care, for caregiving support, for respite care, for spelling to be legitimized in school, to have the assistance their kids need, their siblings need, that it's just like bring telepathy into the mix, forget it. And I think it really became a love army. I mean, really, of like kind of building this world and everyone meeting each other and realizing their strength in numbers and then letting this thing launch.
You guys have done some studies recently that you haven't talked about. Would you like to hint at that just a bit?
Yeah.
Because I think when people first initially see the videos of you doing these studies with
Mhm.
Akil or any of the other individuals, I mean, it's tough to think there's an inherent innocence there,
Yeah.
like that anything would be contrived, but there is that back part of our mind that is skeptical of like
Always.
maybe something's happening, there's some cueing, subconscious cueing, or who knows how it could happen, but lots of magic tricks happen that we don't know how they unfold.
Yeah.
And so I think taking this even deeper on the scientific side to be able to really do these studies um, brings it to that point where it's self-evident. So
Yeah.
would you
Yeah,
like to share?
absolutely. So after the telepathy tapes, we started making the documentary film, which was kind of always the point. It was to do documentary film first, but then the podcast came first and it worked out how it should. But so we are really deep into filming the documentary film. It's almost like production will be wrapped in August, which is exciting. And of course, we're following the storylines of some of these beautiful individuals and their families, but of course, the science storyline too. Um, there's a QEEG specialist named Jeff Tarrant, and he witnessed the first few studies we did with Dr. Powell. They even did their own studies when I wasn't there. I was filming other stuff, and he was just like, "Holy shit! I mean, what is happening here?" So after he saw what he saw, he kind of went on his own to try to innovate, like a different brain scanning software with a built-in letterboard that you could separate a parent and a student. And I think for him, or a parent and a child, or whoever the telepathic pair was. So he's really started innovating this, but he also realized in order to really get the science accredited, you had to work with he had to work with another neuroscientist. And best if it's not Dr. Powell, right? It should be someone peer reviewing and repeating. So we were being contacted by numerous neuroscientists after the telepathy tapes came out. And we started talking to some of them, and there was a woman named Dr. Julia Mossbridge who I really liked her ethos, and I think she presumed competence, which was really important, and understood these were individuals. And so she was like, I would love to get in touch with maybe a teacher who has access to a lot of non-speakers and start doing some tests on my own, which is always scary because I'm like, I don't know who this woman is. I mean, she could be working for the CIA for all I
Right.
know. Like, you never know. But she seemed wonderful and her past work was brilliant. And so it was like, okay, just take a deep breath and just, okay, let science do its thing. And I just stayed out of it. These weren't individuals I've ever tested. And, Dr. Mossberg started reporting back from the field, like, okay, we have a non-speaker and their communication partner in one room, another non-speaker and their communication partner in another room. No walls are touching. There's no audio. There's no way that there's could be anything. And she's like, and instead of just showing them numbers or words like you were, I'm trying to test some wisdom and show a video. And like the first video she showed a non-speaker, I think was of that Coco, the gorilla that learned sign language.
Mm.
And in the other room, the other non-speaker started saying, like, I see a pet and it looks hairy. It's kind of human-like. It's a primate and it seems to know language. I mean, it was just like it was the statistical opportunity for that to be chance is nil. And then they repeated it. And then the non-speakers got a little dysregulated and they were done. And so I remember getting that phone call a few months ago that they did it twice in a row. And I was like, that's huge. And I was like, can you repeat it? And try it with other kids. And the teacher this morning called me and said, I don't know if you've talked to Dr. Mossbridge, but we've been doing more tests and we've repeated it over and over and over again with multiple kids from different rooms, not just validating the telepathy, but validating the authorship that they are writing. These are their words. And I mean, I got that call this morning, which was so serendipitous that I'm here. And I mean, I just start crying because it's like all the families, all these teachers, everyone knows it. And I think the skepticism of like, of course, that's to be, it's going to happen, of course, but I think was very harmful to some of the families who already have felt traumatized and not believed, and to have the world being like, oh, we think you're faking these tests, or like making it up. Non-speaking individuals who have nothing to gain, and their families who are just fighting tooth and nail every day to have a normal existence, like aren't making it up, but to have that scientific validation is just everything. So now they were like, okay, you can come film it. And so that was the next big question, is like, if we bring cameras into the room and people into the room, how is this going to change it? But for science, it's kind of over, because now other scientists can come watch. Anyone can come validate this. I mean, they're doing it. But yeah, I mean, I want to film it big time. So
Yeah.
that's our goal in August.
We're living amidst a cultural revolution and evolution in paradigm and our perception of consciousness. And we can get into theories about all this, but just to make this again, just to reiterate it, these are various different studies you're doing, whether you're showing Uno cards, numbers on a screen, words that are, or a video in certain cases that are exposed to the child's caretaker. In that study that you heard about this morning, or that they did, was the person their teacher or parent, or was it somebody random?
No, I mean, well, one of them was a teacher,
Mhm.
and I think the other one was a just different teacher. So what's so great is every single student in her classroom, because I asked this, I said, who are they spelling with? And she's like, different people. Sometimes it's a sibling, it's a parent, it's one of us, it's a communication regulation partner who works at this clinic or this school. So that's great, because they're working with all different people, so they can replicate this regardless of who the communication regulation partner is in the room. That doesn't matter. Um, yeah, so it's really fascinating, because what we've been doing to this point is having our partition between a speller and whoever they're telepathic with. Um,
Which a speller just is a
oh,
catch-all
that's
term for.
yeah. So the non-speaking individuals who, again, have the families and those who love non-speakers are often reporting not just telepathy, but other spiritual gifts. Um, And so many of these non-speaking individuals, the doctors tell the families when they're little, they'll never speak. They won't be smart above a 3 or 4-year-old, like level. They kind of take away all hope. And there's often the sense that this individual's locked inside. Well, what's happened is that some families, thank God, like take a chance and or try to get their child unlocked by teaching them this technique called, the casual term is spelling, which is pointing to letters on a letterboard. There's different types of methods. There's rapid prompting method. There's spelling to communicate. There's the speller's method. This is the catch-all we've been saying
Yeah.
is just the speller's method. And what's remarkable is once the individual starts spelling, it takes a lot of time, because you have to learn that the individuals who have this telepathic gift have usually something called apraxia, which is a mind-body disconnect. So you're trying to control your body. You have to learn the motor planning just to point. It can take a long time. And once they are pointing and spelling things, it can take a long time to get something out, but it's often quite profound and beautiful, and so magical to so many of these families, is it's information that the family themselves didn't know. It could be the individual diagnosing themselves, what they need. It could be any interest that maybe the parents didn't know. They're one of the young individuals in the Telepathy Tapes is named Houston, and when he first started spelling, he recited the Gettysburg Address, and his mom was like, "What is happening right now?" Um, Natalia, who's in our studio actually right now, she's become a great friend, and her sister's a non-speaker, and they're in the movie, but she's in LA right now. She has a story about her sister recommending an herb to treat something that was going on in Natalia's body that turned out to be a herb Natalia didn't know about, but it was exactly what she needed to heal. And so anyway, so spelling has become a way to unlock these individuals. And as almost every family I've met has said, is like the the telepathy, the sense that something is going on, the mind reading has been there all along, but spelling gives you a way to validate it.
So telepathy can be kind of a catch-all term for this big umbrella of these latent capabilities, like you spoke to, where it seems like they're reading someone's mind, but they're also in various different instances having access to information and bilocating or remote viewing, or like there's a litany of different examples and capabilities that
Yeah.
these children have. Before we go into why the theories of of these individuals, as opposed to anyone else, would have more readily access to these
Mm.
capacities. I think it's important to just speak to the cultural scientific paradigm of materialism and how pervasive that is, and then we'll start to
Yeah.
go from there. So I'm sure as you've started the telepathy tapes and you've gotten criticism or pushback, a lot of it is coming from this presupposed notion of how reality works.
Right.
And so, how do you explain it after
Yeah.
facing it all these
And
years?
I love that you asked that because I do think it's one of the most important takeaways for a lot of people from the telepathy tapes is just realizing we live in a paradigm. So a paradigm is, right, the rules that kind of write the world in which we live in. And for the past few hundred years, materialism, which is not wanting fancy purses and cars. Materialism in this case is this idea that what is real, it can be measured and observed. And so most of science, therefore, right, you can measure and observe it. So things that we can't measure and observe, therefore, have often been dismissed or even ridiculed or just rejected, and that could be something as, like God, right? Like, oh, that can't exist, to something like ghosts, to something like telepathy. And if you believed in that stuff or studied it, you were often just considered completely foolish. And even if the data was coming back really remarkable, what they would often do is attack the scientist, not the data, or attack the institution who dared publish this quote unquote garbage or whatever. And it has been extraordinarily damaging, and to the point where there's a lack of funding to look into this type of thing. There's a lack of willingness to put your neck on the line if you are a scientist or a researcher or a parent or teacher who is witnessing this every day all over the world. And so materialism has had a grip on all of us, not just by like how our worldview has come together, but in what we feel we can talk about and still feel smart, right? Like there is that thing that I think many people who are like, I'm really smart. I listen to NPR and I could never say that I believe in God or that I believe in this. Like I would feel foolish, or it just made people feel dumb or gullible or silly, or you can't be educated or well read if you believe in this stuff. And what I wanted to do with the telepathy tapes is just drop the scales from people's eyes in a way and say, this is happening to you. This is not the world you live in. This is the world you're being told you live in. And any real serious scientist would tell you, we don't know where consciousness comes from. We can't explain many, many things. We can't explain what gravity is and where that comes from. So, and quantum physics has, I think, opened the door for people, which is the study of things that are very small. And when we've been studying things extremely small, they're not obeying the same rules in which the rest of the world lives by. So one of the major points, I just want to drop this and then it'll help everything else come to clarity for people, like, is that, when we talk about this in the telepathy tapes, that materialism, most of it's right? The idea like biology and physics and math and psychology and the ways that we understand our world are great. Like we should not throw out the textbooks, but for so long, if you think of materialism like a pyramid, and the base of this might be, right, like physics, and after that is chemistry and biology and psychology. At the tippy top of the pyramid was consciousness. And everyone's like, I don't know where it comes from. I can't explain why these other things happen too, like precognition or a dream where this happens, or this experience, or the thoughts someone had that their mom died and then they get the phone call, or, no one could explain that stuff and no one could explain consciousness. So they just ignored it or dismissed it and ridiculed it. And that was that. And here's our theory of reality. And some scientists who really started looking into near-death experiences, let's say, that were, or dared to study something like mediumship or psychic abilities or remote viewing or telepathy, and saw this stuff bearing out, we're thinking, well, you have to account for this. It's bearing out. It's bearing out in the data. There has been multiple peer-reviewed studies showing that telepathy is occurring in many, many cases, neurotypical cases. And you can't just dismiss it. So we have to account for it. So many of these scientists said we need a post-materialist view of the world in which consciousness is not the top of the pyramid, it's on the bottom. And in that world, it means consciousness is fundamental. It comes before everything else. It means that everything is invisible, really, before it's physical. It's non-physical before it's physical. All of us, everything about our world. And if we start thinking about the world this way, there are no big question marks left. It accounts for everything. things like telepathy or a god or precognition or remote viewing, all of this can make sense because if it's non-physical, we're all connected in this very non-physical way. So I think the telepathy, I think, was a big part of the telepathy tapes, but this post-materialist paradigm in which I I would put my life on is going to be the right way of science. What 200 years, everyone is like, yes, this is how science is. And the people clinging to the current paradigm, I think, are going to be on the wrong side of history.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, there's so many resources and great thinkers that are actively working on this. And some of them we've had on the show, like Donald Hoffman. Annika Harris is a great researcher around this, Federico Fagin, Philip Goff. And it's interesting because we look at mystics and sages throughout time and philosophy like Advaita Vedanta, and they speak to how the universe is mental and Hermeticism. And now we're coming to this point where there actually is scientific understanding of the non-locality of consciousness and exploring all these things. Have you heard of the philosophical kind of understanding of Hegel's dialectic?
Mm-mm.
It's great. So it's like basically, very simply, you have a thesis or so it's like a proposition or an idea of a worldview. You have the antithesis, which is the opposition to that. And then you have the synthesis, which is a higher order resolution of both ideas that preserve the truth of both independent things, but transcends the conflict. They see how they're integrated. And so paradox in many ways is actually can be a signature of depth. It's not a failure of logic. And so when you look at materialism and you have these emerging studies of consciousness being perhaps more fundamental, and we can go into different theories, it's easy just to say, oh, well, materialism is just wrong. It's like, no, from a perspective, it has its place. It's just not the whole story.
Right.
And so I think what these studies that you're doing and emerging understanding of the scientific understanding of consciousness perhaps being a more fundamental constituent of nature is really important, I think, to highlight there how multiple things can be true simultaneously.
Yes.
And Niels Bohr, who's one of the founders of quantum mechanics, also has a great quote around this, how he says, the opposite of a fact is a falsehood, but the opposite of a profound truth may very well be another profound truth.
Yeah.
And so it's just fascinating how two things can be mutually exclusive, context dependent, both true.
Yeah.
And I think that's important when we have these conversations to be able to have and balance seeming paradoxes because it's pervasive throughout the universe.
Right. Yeah.
And to be able to actually understand something, we need to be able to hold the balance of both.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking about something because, we've talked a lot about this as we were gearing up to how to really test this well, because when I was going around just trying to figure out proof of concept, do I spend my life for years looking into this? I was just doing tests on my own, it wasn't, but or, filming Dr. Powell's, but we, realized we have to make this way more airtight. And just kind of to this point, we had a roundtable in Los Angeles a few weeks ago where we brought in scientists from Yale, from UC San Diego, from Tilt. I mean, different groups. Dr. Tarrant was there, Dr. Julie Mossbridge. And I was like, I really want y'all to talk to non-speakers and their families and communication regulation partners and spelling people. So everyone can get on the same page with how to test, what's ethical, what do the non-speakers want? They should have a seat at the table and what's possible. And boom, let's all talk about this. And there was a scientist there from UC San Diego who said something brilliant, which was just one question you all have to ask is, because I think all the parents were like, look, and siblings and anyone that was there was like, we know this is happening. It's not a matter of if for us, it's why. So y'all are still looking at proof-oriented research, but all you have to do is ask anyone in this world, and this is the truth. So let's talk about why. And then the scientists are kind of we have, in order to get funding to put our necks out there, we have to look at the if first and then the why. And there's all this different stuff. But one scientist said something so brilliant. She's like, you don't have to test everything in a lab to know it's true. She's like, we understood quite quickly that x-rays were causing damage by looking at the data, by looking at huge amounts of people that were, having radiation issues from having an x-ray. Or there's other things like that where we, can look at a huge group of people and been like, oh, the water's wrong in this area because everyone's getting sick. And let's test their blood. And, we didn't bring one person in and start looking for it. So she's like, there's many ways to do science. And there is something important when there's huge groups of people saying this is the truth. It's our truth. And who cares if you're on board? Like, this is our truth. And I've just been like my own um swirl in my own mind about that of like when the world is like so far behind one, it's like almost like a third world country and a first world country where you have this group of individuals who've been systematically dismissed, ignored, abused in many cases. And yet like anyone who knows and loves them knows that they unlock the key to consciousness is quite beautiful. And the idea of like, let's put it in a lab, a one non-speaker at one point. I mean, we're going to do it. We're going to put it in the lab. We're going to do it because everyone else needs it. But the non-speakers don't. And one non-speaker once asked me, like, why are people so obsessed with studying this with instruments? How come you haven't tried to prove love? And I was like, okay, that's a very profound question. And you're right. Like, how would you bring love into a lab and prove it? Because I think for a lot of non-speaking individuals, this would be like a reflection of like just deep connection, like utter what humans are meant to do is connect in such an effortless way where you don't need words and all the things that come with words, which is misrepresentation, withholding, sarcasm, lies, white lies, all that stuff, just this most pure, pure thing. And if love is the best superpower in the world that changes how we live and how we move and how we act, like, but we're not trying to test that. I thought they're so beautiful that a non-speaker is like, if you're not trying to test love, why are you trying to test this? Like, it's the same thing. And I just thought that was so beautiful and profound.
Yeah. Yeah, we have this deeply ingrained fetish with the intellect
Yeah.
in this age that we live in, like we've spoken to, and uh, great thinkers like the famous logician Kurt Gödel, around the time of the Vienna Circle, through his incompleteness theorem, proved mathematically how truth transcends proof,
Mm.
and
Mm.
it's like you don't need to know all of the ingredients and biochemistry of a meal to enjoy it
Right.
and to be nourished by it.
Yeah.
And yet we have that desire to, analytically be able to understand everything. And of course, like I love that side of things too.
Me too.
It's just
Yeah.
when we solely identify as we mistake our models of reality for reality itself.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yes. And I think about, Socrates, who talked about gnosis a lot and
Yep.
knowing. And the argument even back then, which I think is so funny, is if you read something, you're getting a bunch of posers walking around acting like they know something, And I mean, the example I used in the telepathy tapes is like you could read about what's in a marshmallow, but you don't know it until you've tasted it. And I think from Socrates' point of view, it would be like if you read, the only wise person who really knows something is the one experiencing it. That's the one who knows. The people who read about it don't. And that's been so interesting watching this unfold because I'm like, the only people who really know are the non-speakers and those working closely with them every day. And, you could watch like, media being printed or journalists trying to attack spelling and attack this. It's like, but go just spend time with the people doing this every single day. And it goes back to this old ancient argument of like, to know things, you have to truly experience it. You can't just read about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that distinction is super important, and just allowing them to do what they both do best. And we live in an age where we can, of course, like get analytical, and the Sanskrit term is vidya for this, so like information that you can read in a book, but jnana, which is like the wisdom that and that you get inspired by reading the book or hearing something that is a self-gnosis that awakens from within. It's bottom up. It's not top down from a psychological perspective. And the Buddhist perspective on this as well, the term is non-conceptual valid cognition. So you can know things without having a direct input of somebody giving you that information from the outside in. And we're seeing this, of course, through all these studies and savants and all these capabilities that you've been exploring through the telepathy tapes. And so let's explore. I know you've been diving down various rabbit holes, exploring possible alternative theories around consciousness, as it is fascinating. And there are many great thinkers that have alternative perspectives and have for a long time, like, more recent ones like Rupert Sheldrake, and with morphic resonance. And I think Thomas Berry is quoted as saying that life is not a collection of objects, but a communion of subjects.
Mm.
That there are
I
these,
love
that there's an interiority to all
that.
experience
Hmm.
throughout the cosmos. And so, how did this start to shake up your understanding of what consciousness is, and perhaps how it could be viewed more as like our brains, like a radio antenna, picking up signals, than through the hard problem of consciousness perspective, thinking that consciousness is just an emergent phenomena of unconscious complexity.
Hmm.
I think it helps kind of explain how telepathy isn't per se somebody reading someone's mind, but tuning
Right.
into a field.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
What's up, everyone? Something I have been experimenting a bunch with over the past few years is how music, binaural beats, and various tonal frequencies at different hertz affect our mind and our body. I think sound is one of the most underutilized tools to support us on our journey of well-being. I've explored many different audio platforms over the years, and the one I would recommend to most people is Brain.fm. Brain.fm is an app that curates science-backed music that syncs your brain patterns, helping you focus better, relax deeper, and sleep easier. I love having a variety of soundscapes, like their deep work one for focused attention, or others that help you downregulate and meditate. They are hooking you guys up with a free 30-day trial by going to brain.fm/know thyself. That's brain.fm/know thyself for 30 days free. Always, you can check out our partners page at knowthyselfpodcast.com as well. I hope you enjoy. Back to the show. Don't you just love Kai? She's great.
in the view of materialism, right? Consciousness is your brain, and so it dies with you. It's born with you. It only lives in your brain, and I think for many people that's problematic because we engage so much with the outside world. I mean, it's kind of like what, but anyway, one of the ideas, like Rupert Sheldrake, you mentioned, who's a Cambridge biologist, brilliant man, and he studied telepathy in animals. And one of the things that he has posed as a really interesting thought is that we understand that the Earth has a gravitational field. You can't see it. You know it's there. It's very powerful. You know a magnet has a magnetic field. You can't see it, but you know it's there. And he's this idea that we have a brain, yes, but we have a mental field around it. And that mental field extends beyond us. And it most overlaps with our deepest bonded connections, especially in animal groups where we are social. And so the most easy way to visualize this, I think, for people would be like a school of fish. Like, how are they moving like that and not bumping into each other? Or, like a murmur of birds or something. Like how? I mean, maybe there's like a leader that they're all watching, but it happens in a split millisecond. And so, I think this idea of there's like a mental field around them. But that mental field has been studied by Rupert Sheldrake, and the sense of being stared at is a very real thing. People will know if someone's staring at them in studies at a statistically relevant way. And not only will they know and turn when someone's staring at them, but they turn the right direction and look at exactly where the stare is coming from. Biologically, that makes a lot of sense, right? There's a survival element to that I think from an evolution point of view, we'd be like, oh, okay. It would be very helpful to have a mental field extending beyond us, or to know where your pack is if you get separated, or if you're hunting where the prey might be. There is a real great survival element to this. But then it does make you wonder about why. And I think so for consciousness, especially after the Telepathy Tapes came out, we actually kept going, kind of going through our inbox of like questions and people having experts writing with what, they found to be true. And we kind of released a companion series afterward called The Talk Tracks, which has been exploring this. And for me, like, to answer your question, I almost want to tell another story about what consciousness is. And I do think it comes from us. And we are a TV or a radio that is receiving a signal. And I think one argument to that could be like, oh, well, why then, if someone has a brain injury, do they stop working if consciousness is coming from somewhere else? Well, I think of it just like a piano and a pianist. Like, if you, in order to make a music, you have to have a piano and a pianist. And you could smash the pianist can't play it anymore. It's over.
Yeah.
So
Like if you damage the antenna of
Right.
a radio signal, it's not going to be able to pick up that frequency.
Exactly. So I think it's a very similar thing. But with the talk tracks, we have been exploring consciousness. And one of the things that was coming into our inbox and was shocking to us were people saying, this is happening in the world of dementia. This is happening in the world of Alzheimer's. is just like the parents and the people working with non-speakers saying that telepathy is real. We are seeing this. This is real for us in senior living facilities and nursing groups. Like, we are seeing this. And when my, you know, counterpart who works with me first brought this to my attention, I was like, what is this? Just like one or two weird emails? Like, don't worry about it. Like, we don't have to. And she's like, no, Kai, it's like a lot, like 10, 20, 25, like lots of emails are coming in. So we started exploring it and we interviewed people, and it was the exact same experience where they would hear their loved one in their mind telling them how to help them get into the car or go to the bathroom, like very physical, just rudimentary things to make life easier. And once that was kind of turned on for someone, it often was turned on for other people, so they could start to hear other Alzheimer's or dementia, whether it's patients or just people out and about. And I mean, you just have to listen to that Talk Tracks episode about dementia. It is fascinating. And then we started talking to animal communicators who were like, this is really real. And you can actually cure animals by what they're telling you. You can engage with making them feel safer. So they're able, like one of the women we had, I think in episode 2 of the Talk Tracks, was a woman named Dita Young, who works with Olympians and helps their horses travel easier in, trailers if they're scared of doing that, or could figure out why it stopped wanting to do jumps. And it because the Olympian that was riding it had arthritis and the horse didn't want to hurt it. And the woman didn't know. And the animal communicator is saying, your horse is saying you have arthritis. The woman gets it checked out and sure enough, she's arthritis. Just these unbelievable stories that make you wonder, okay, is it a mental field or something bigger going on there? And I think the only way that I think about it is that consciousness is certainly fundamental. It's there before we engage in with our body, and it's there after, and it extends beyond us. And because love and community is such a huge part of who we are, it can overlap with the people we love and need the most. It was a really long, weird answer.
No, that was great.
Okay.
keep the long, weird ones coming. I think it's really fascinating to talk about animals just for a second here, because that's also been studied with Rupert Sheldrake, and that they, in a statistically significant way, know when their owners are coming home. 50% in dogs, 30% in cats, where they will control all the potential variables, whether it's like a different car they come in, the time of home that the owner will come home. And it's been tested up to those 50% and 30% in cats, where the moment like the
attention turns toward home.
Moment the attention of the person who's driving home decides to come home, the dog will go up to the window.
Yeah. And what I love is any good scientist who studies this stuff has to be so buttoned up. It's more airtight than like cancer studies, truly, in many cases, because it has to be, right? And so when Rupert Sheldrake, Dr. Sheldrake, was doing these tests, he would have people come home in random cars from different directions, on bikes, whatever, in a taxi, so the dog wouldn't know which direction it was coming from, what sound it was unfamiliar at unfamiliar times. They would page them to come home. And if the person had a flat tire, the dog's attention would suddenly, leave the door and go and lie in his bed. They were filming the animals. Or if the person was leaving work and was like excited to go home, the dog would go start waiting by the door. And if the boss was like, oh, hold on, we got to come back. We got to talk about XYZ. And their attention turned back to the office, the dog at that moment would go leave the front door and go back to its bed or, jump on the couch. So the attention, the intention and the attention of the owner was connected to the dog. And what's so interesting is, like, I've watched this unfold or heard stories of it unfolding now many times with teachers or parents, or again, someone who's connected to a non-speaker, where they will seemingly tune in. Like Marianne Harrington, who's a teacher who first started witnessing this 30 years ago. She has a story where the first time she ever realized this is she went to a store one night and she bought like donuts and Swedish fish and Oreos or whatever stuff to bring as a treat the next day, and she forgot it in the car. And this was a non-speaking individual with autism that she was visiting that was no longer in her class. So she brought all the treats to go visit his class. And she shows up, does the stuff in the class, sees him. And like before she left, he came over and he drew a picture of a fish and a donut and, what looked like an Oreo. I forgot the 3 treats, but he drew pictures. And she was like, how does he know? How on earth does he know? I didn't even think about it at all right now. So his attention must have tapped in with me while I was at the store. But at this point, this young individual wasn't spelling yet, so there's no way to ask him. And years later, he is spelling. And she said, "How did you know that about the treats years ago?" And he said, "Well, I knew right when your attention tuned into me the night before when you were in the store. Like that was like the invitation to jump in." And we've heard that so many times on repeat that
Mm.
like when your attention or intention is on someone, it kind of opens up a window between you.
Yeah, and people like William James and Aldous Huxley have explored theories around transmission of consciousness, and if it is a greater field in which we're all connected to and is not bound by time and space in the conventional materialist notion, then it could make sense. And they explain how our brains are more of like a reduction valve or filtering system,
Hmm.
because quite honestly, it would be extremely overwhelming for our mind and nervous system to be exposed to all the information that's currently around us.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is how thinking, okay, we're seeing a lot of examples through animals, more vastly observed in these non-speaking autistic children, but it's something that is pervasive that we all have access to varying
Hmm.
degrees. And so when you think about resonance, like have
Hmm.
you seen that video of like you take a tuning fork at like 432 hertz or whatever, and
Hmm.
you bring another one and you hit one, and the other one starts vibrating next to it, even though they're not physically touching.
Hmm.
Or if you bring a different hertz, it won't, right? So there's like, that's the perfect example through physics, how we can see that resonance on the same frequency passes along information, and there's like a highway there and connectivity
Hmm.
between the two. And so when you've been studying and seeing how there's this emotional attunement between a caretaker, a teacher, a parent, and their autistic child, and there is this very connected access way between their consciousness. What comes to mind as how that could perhaps explain how this information is being traveled?
Yeah. And one thing I want to say is I don't know if it has anything to do with autism. I think it has to do with non-speaking abilities who are people who are have apraxia, like they're less connected to their body. And I do think there is something deeply profound about that ability where you don't know where your body is. You don't know you have hands sometimes. You don't know where your feet are. Um, like some of the non-speakers we work with have to kick everything in the room to know exactly where it is before they walk in. And it's lovely. It's just lovely, I think, to watch individuals walk through the world in a different way and to not know you have a body. It would make you exist so differently on a different plane, I think. Um, but okay, wanted to say that, but what was your question again?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up
Yeah.
because if our identification with the density of our body would maybe kind of limit us
Yes.
access to these more subtle realms, then their access to these different vibrations and subtle resonances would be stronger.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
I think that is it. I mean, I do think again, like it is I think many non-speakers will say, I'm not in my body. It's hard to control. You know, it's very frustrating, and the place they reside the most is not in their body, and so trying to figure out what that looks like and what that means is tricky, I think, and but for a lot of people who work with non-speakers or live or love them, will like there was a woman we were just filming in England, and she said, you know, I feel like my son Kyle is in a different field, and I would consider this field like a third field way out there, and it's non-physical, and it's really hard for him to get to my field, the first field, which was very physical and very material and very heavy and very here. And she's like, and then there's like a field between us, which I think that might be like music and art and meditation, like a dreams, like that can kind of bridge it. And she's like, but with like great love and attention, and if I clear out all of my ego, everything, and I fully hold space, it almost creates a bridge for him to come through. And she's like, and in that space, we can write music together. I know he can come to me in dreams and communicate with me. And while we were there, I was like shocked to my core because Kyle has never learned to spell with a letter board. That's just, I think they say, she said there's 3 people who teach that in all of England. So that's like a whole different problem to address. But she's like, we've never had to, because if I clear myself, we can get to this telepathic field together where I know what he wants, or he can come to me in dreams. But while there, she told me he came to me in a dream the night before with lyrics to a song. And I was like, this is amazing. Let's film it. I want to film the process. And she's like, okay, so typically like I have to clear my mind, and often the music will start to come and I'll start to write it and he'll say yes or no. So she tries to hold the space, and I just imagine like almost like a straw, like, right? Like how trying to pull like something into like this field. And And all of a sudden, Kyle picks up the pen and starts writing it on a piece of paper. Of course, we have it on film. It's beautiful. And he's writing in the most perfect font on paper. And I was just like, what is happening? He's writing it out. And it was amazing. And she's like, if I'm holding the space and I become this bridge where he can come to this field and beyond. And I thought, my gosh, this is kind of like what people talk about with spelling is there is a mystery about it. Like you have apraxia spelling. If you are a good communication regulation partner who has been trained, it's almost like you learn how to hold the space and become this like grounding rod for these individuals. And that's tricky for science to talk about. Like, why does spelling work? I don't know. Your body is like becoming a grounding rod, but like what Caroline was explaining with Kyle, I think is a similar thing. And when asked why or how you can do this with this person, but not this person with a lot of non-speakers, they'll say stuff like good vibes or love, you know, and a certain amount of just pure attention and love and like confidence and belief in you, your ability, your competence can pierce the apraxia and make it melt away. So I think that at the simplest form, truly being present and loving someone, like truly being loving and present and sitting with them and believing in them that you are competent, you are in there. I don't care what the doctors are telling me that you're not. I don't believe them. Like that changes lives. It changes what you're capable of. And it also can turn on these gifts.
Hey everyone, a quick share. If you have been listening for a while, you know that I'm all about stacking healthy habits. And one tool I've really enjoyed is red light therapy. Over the years, I've started with meditation in the morning and a few days of the week, stack it with red light. It's made a noticeable difference in my energy and my sleep. There are over 4,000 peer-reviewed studies showing benefits for cellular healing, boosting collagen, supporting testosterone, and so much more. If you're curious about trying it out, Boncharge is a solid company that I recommend. Their red light devices have the lowest EMF levels on the market. They have no flicker, combine both near infrared and red light in one lightweight device. They ship worldwide and have an easy return policy and also an array of other science-backed wellness products worth checking out. If you want to give them a try, go to boncharge.com/knowthyself and use code knowthyself to save 15%. That's boncharge.com/knowthyself and use code knowthyself to save 15%. Boncharge products are all HSA and FSA eligible, giving you tax-free savings of up to 40%. I hope you dig it. Back to the show. That notion that through stillness and like a radio signal that has extra frequencies and creating static noise around, you can't hear quite the song that's playing on the radio or whatever's happening on that channel. And it would make sense that the more that we tune into our own inherent vibratory state, which is more of our true nature, commensurate with love and peace and stillness and that state of clarity, that access would be that much stronger. What is that? How has that changed your notion of what love is as perhaps more of like a universal conductor and connector? And like how has it changed since like getting exposed to all this deeper and deeper, how you move through the world? I'm curious.
Well, it's interesting. So many people, I mean, not so many, but people fall into two categories, right? Like, this is amazing. I want to figure out how to do it myself. And then there's some people who are really totally wigged out at the thought of like someone reading thoughts. And you think about it and like our the icky parts of the world, like corporations and politics and wars. I mean, all that stuff depends on secrecy. Patents. I mean, everything that like drives our economy and our security is based on secrets, our politics. And it's like the only way we can reimagine a new world is if the secrets weren't there, right? And so we've talked about this internally, I think, just like as our team with many of the families and those, and you know, this beautiful network have just formed, which is like, you have to clear your thoughts. You have to pure your thoughts. And knowing someone can listen to them, yes, or that they're affecting people, but also how you feel affects people. Like everything we're doing, the non-speakers are saying they're receiving like sponges, but we all are too. It's just like you said, we have a greater filter, I think, in many ways to filter it out, but it's affecting us. And pretty quickly, if you're around non-speaker, yes, you are having cleaner thoughts, clearer thoughts. You have to. I think if you love them, you're going to really try hard. And I've noticed it on our film shoots. Everyone, we talk about it before people walk in the door, before they sign up to do it. It's like, have really clean, beautiful thoughts. Like, please be affirming these individuals every step of the way, and how that changes everything, how it changes the whole love and the energy just everywhere when people are only thinking nice things all day long or thinking nothing at all, right? Just really clearing it out. And if we were all doing that, can you imagine what would happen with like our friendships, our nation, our corporations, or how we treat people, how we treat each other? And so this idea of like being scared of having someone read your mind, it's like, well, then look at what's in your mind.
Yeah.
Just change what's in your mind. And if we were all doing that, I mean, the world would change completely. So I think when people talk about like, is this a step to evolution? I think about it not as like, are we all going to become telepathic? I mean, maybe that's going to happen, but I really think about the first step being basic, like just changing what you're thinking. Because if consciousness is fundamental, then every thought we have is connected to everyone else. And what we are thinking is completely manifesting the world. And it could be good or bad. And we get to choose.
It's a powerful and often confronting notion to many to think that thoughts are things, that they have an actual substance to them that is more energetic and we can't physically see them, but that doesn't change anything. Everybody listening and watching this podcast right now is doing it because there are non-visible forces making this possible, you know? And so it's interesting to see on the macro scale what happens when this perspective and understanding, if it was applied more thoroughly throughout society, and how we approach people and how that changes how they view themselves and how they navigate through the world. And through these parents not giving up on their non-speaking children, and to realize that there's somebody in there, they just have that disconnection and disassociation with their body. And by believing in them, they believe in themselves, and their access to the state and communication becomes that much more powerful.
Like we have been seeing amazing things with just love and attention and belief, because like Kyle's on my mind because we just left England, but we'd be like out on rocks near the ocean. I'd be like, Kyle, can you step up here again? Like that's tricky with apraxia. And then, I think Caroline's probably thinking, he did it once, Kyle, like, don't push your luck. And Kyle would do it again and again and again. And it was like amazing because like apraxia doesn't work that way. You cannot tell your body what to do. And she was just like, he knew how important this was. He knew that you expected him to rise to the occasion, and he did it. And what was so cool, like we did our hill shoot where we had families with non-speakers from all around come to a location where we were shooting our metaphysical hill, which is a telepathic channel where many non-speakers meet.
That's quite the sentence you just said.
Yeah, I know.
It's awesome.
And one of the things that I know like our producers were hearing, and it was really valid, was families being like, I don't think my child can travel. It's going to be really hard for them to be on a plane. They can't go more than 90 minutes. They can't go more than 2 hours. They're going to become dysregulated. Like they don't go out into airports. Like just the fear. And often that's because of a society who can be really mean to like someone who looks different, sounds different, moves different. And I think probably for a lot of non-speakers, when they go out into the world, they're feeling that anxiety and sometimes shame. And it's just like, blah. Well, for this though, it's like the non-speakers got onto their planes. They were good. They were able to like really, I think, elevate to the best version of their capabilities to maintain their like, I don't even know what, to stay regulated long enough to get there, that it wasn't really super stressful for their families. And it's just like, I think because there was this belief from their loved ones being like, you can do this, you will get there, we're taking you. And then what happened on the hill, I'll never forget this moment. And it was like one of the most touching things. So in the podcast, people fall in love with John Paul and his girlfriend, Lily. And I don't want to tell what happens because it's kind of like a big, spoiler. But one of the things is, they're both non-speakers, and Lily has a really hard time lifting her chin, and John Paul is gigantic. He's like 7 feet tall. So, he lifts her head like that to help, to help her look at him. And it's really hard for her to lift her chin. And there's one moment when we're shooting on the hill and it starts pouring. And everyone, they're scared about the camera equipment. They're scared about everything. And everyone's like leaving. And I was just like, Lily's on this hill and it's so beautiful. And like, I knew the moment this could be used in the film, which I don't want to say again because it's like a spoiler, but it's like in my brain, I'm like, Lily, please stay there if you're comfortable. Like, this is so great. And she was just like in it. And then I got the camera guy to come with the camera and the umbrellas. And, we went over there. And it was like pouring rain, and Lily's on this hill, and it was like, Lily, can you look up? And she just like looked up, and it's like, can you look straight ahead? And that does not happen with apraxia at all. And it's like for a moment, it was pierced, and she was just able to control her body and like be in that moment and do exactly what she needed to do, I think for John Paul, and it was beautiful. And like after it, like she had a huge smile on her face. And it's fun because her parents are like, it's hard even to smile someone with dyspraxia. Like often your emotions showing on your face don't match what's going on. And Lily's smile was gigantic. And I remember saying, let's get you to a warm shower. Like we'll warm you in blankets. There's a cabin nearby. And she spelled no. I'm like, I think she wrote like, I'm warm with love or something like that. And we went back to like the holding area where there's food and, you know, it's just a lot of people milling about. And she just like laid on the floor in a blanket with such a smile. And it's like she knew that she like showed up and did exactly what she wanted to do in that moment for the film, for her story. And it's beautiful because, I mean, we've all been talking about this now, I would say, as like a community of non-speakers and those who love them, is like when you are believing in them and say, you can do this. The world's telling you can't, but I know you can. They will. And I think there's just been, imagine, the scientists, the doctors, the teachers, so often family members, community members, neighbors, fast food workers, anyone that you've come into contact with is like, ugh, like doesn't believe in you, doesn't believe you're in there, upset or frustrated by how you're acting or controlling your body. Can you imagine going through the world that way? What that would do to your, not like your spirit, your heart, your mind, your self-confidence. And so just that little bit of believing in someone is so huge.
It's amazing to implement that in our own daily lives with all the people around us, I think. And it's fascinating to see these different state experiences. You mentioned individuals with dementia that can have this terminal lucidity they refer to with perfect clarity the last few
Yes.
hours of their life before they die. And it just reminded me of that when you were sharing that story, because there are these moments where all of the diagnoses and diseases, like, and the things we struggle with physiologically subside for a second in a moment of energetic kind of clarity and connection. And it's fascinating to see what that reveals about
Yeah.
this world we live in.
Yeah. Actually, when you were saying that, I just thought about something. There's been a few parents who've told me that when maybe their child who was a non-speaker got really sick and suddenly they could speak really well. Like, and it was like, what? But it was like there's fluid in their brain or something was happening or there was a fever, whatever. It did something in their body where all of a sudden they were speaking and it would be for 24 hours and then it was gone the second they got better, which is so wild because it's like something is going on in the body. Like it's all in there. But I don't know. Like we talk about this too. There's been so little interest, I think, in this population that there's been such little research done that I think one beautiful thing happening right now is people are finally like stepping up and wanting to do the research. And I think that's going to be such a gift to society when we include these individuals at the table, you know?
When you speak about all these different individuals and the variants and all the capabilities, I would love to just hear you list off of like, what are the things that you've been seeing or hearing about what is possible? Obviously, telepathy, like we spoke to, is kind of a term for being able to hear, see, experience what is happening within someone else's consciousness, but that extends far beyond into all the different categories throughout ESP. And so,
Yeah.
what are some other things?
Yeah. And even before I say it, like if anyone's listening out there, listen to the podcast first because we hold your hand through it and you will believe, I think, for many people when you listen, when you hear it unfold as because a lot of these things are hard to believe. Things
sounds like something out of a Marvel film.
Yeah. I mean, stuff I didn't believe in, you know, like I really didn't. I knew that like rocks were cool, but I didn't understand that they actually like could heal. And I thought the idea of like crystal stores and stuff, I knew that like, I thought people just projected their own thoughts on them. And it wasn't really until I met non-speakers who like could tell what rock was behind a closet door because of the frequency coming off of it, or would bust through doors because they knew their parent just came home with like crystals and rocks and like could feel them in the house. Like stuff like that made me be like, I believe, okay, I believe, you know, but you know, every single person I think who works with a non-speaker who has witnessed telepathy in their own life, which is many, will say telepathy is the tip of the iceberg. That is the thing you hear over and over and over again. And I was like, what are you all talking about? When I first started meeting families, like, and I think for me, and I think now non-speakers will even say this eventually, is that like it says they dole it out based on what you can handle and when. And I think the parents were even doing that to me a little bit, like, this might really shock you and make you leave. So we're going to do it slowly. And thank God for that, because, you know, as you go slowly through these things, and anyway. So definitely the telepathy. I think another one is seeing beings and spirits. That is quite common. Talking about people who've passed with such clarity and knowledge, even often someone the family doesn't know. And that comes up in the film. And again, I don't want to do a spoiler really, but like, um, actually, uh, a young man who was a non-speaker was talking about a cousin who also was autistic and had apraxia and was kind of ignored and dismissed and forgotten by the family. And he was saying this man was keeping him a lot of company. Well, it turns out this man had been dead for a long time. And that's the type of story that we hear all the time. And teachers hear it. And I think if you talk to a lot of individual teachers or spelling communication partners who work with non-speakers, are constantly talking about other beings that they can't see. Another thing is also connecting in a realm that I don't have access to. It's very hard to access, and non-speakers call it the hill. But if people listen to the talk tracks, we go into older speakers, stories of non-speakers, and one non-speaker years ago in the '90s was calling this the lollipop line, and it's the same idea of this like place where you can connect on a telepathic level and meet and enjoy and heal and help and
Like a non-physical chat room.
a non-physical chat room. And the first time I heard about it, I was like, I don't know about this. I mean, what? And then I thought, well, maybe it's only in Atlanta because this is big here. But then I heard a minister from a mega church in Arizona who had met no one that I knew that had a non-speaker who was talking about the hill. And I was just interviewing this guy because he had figured out the telepathy working in this like big ministry for special needs kids. And he's like, and these kids talk about a place called the hill. And then I met a teacher in the Midwest and another teacher in wherever, and then a man in Israel, and like all of them were like, oh yeah, the hill, the hill, the hill, the hill, the hill, the hill. And that pretty quickly became, okay, well, what is this? It's everyone who doesn't know each other is talking about this place. And it's very real and it's very meaningful. And it is a place where I think when for a lot of individuals who have been dismissed or can't speak in this world can have some beautiful and deep friendships. And we watched that at the physical hill because we invited every non-speaker that wanted to come or could come in our orbit that had talked about it to not every, but that's a huge exaggeration. That were in the film or the podcast that had talked about it to us. And many of these individuals had never met each other, yet were like hugging and so happy and so supportive and knew exactly who the other one was and had, oh yeah, I know her. This one has this or that person has this personality. And like, it was unbelievable to witness these individuals meeting in real life who'd met before. So I think the hill, this metaphysical plane, we were filming in Connecticut and a young man there had explained that there was 27 ephemeral beings, I believe, in the room when we were filming. And we were like, who are they? And, he said some are spirits who've passed and some are other non-speakers who know you're here and they're trying to support me. So that's a big part of it. I think remote viewing, being able to see things that are happening other places. And I've had that happen in really weird ways. Like one time a mom was trying to get a hold of me desperately and I was busy and on emails and phone calls and I saw her calling. I'm like, I can't, I'll have to call her later. And then like I step out for like 8 minutes. I had like a lunch break and like the phone rang and she's like, okay, I know you just stepped into your kitchen for a lunch break. And it was like, what? So I think remote viewing is easy for.
Yeah, there's also many declassified CIA papers using this, I think.
Yeah.
Stargate and
then I think remote viewing through timelines, we're going to release a talk tracks on that really quickly here, but like there was a non-speaker in Illinois who started using a word and was spelling it, and both the teacher and the mom who was sitting there and was like, we don't know this word. Like, what is this word? They start looking up and we don't even find this word. So then they asked him, because often when you're working with a non-speaker and they're spelling, you're writing down everything so you have, right, like a concrete example of what the conversation was. So they asked him, is this the word you meant? And he said, yes. And they said, what does it mean? And he explained what it meant. And he said, and they said, well, where'd you learn this word? He's like, well, from watching this, I think like the Spanish magistrate in 1430. And they were like, what? And anyway, they went home and they looked up the word, and it was a word that left our lexicon in like the 1600s. They had to look really far, but he was using it in the right context, and it would have been like in relationship to like something the Spanish magistrate was doing. And so then they asked him the next day, like, how did you know this? He's like, oh, I went back in time and remote viewed it. Like, I don't even know what that means. And I think for a lot of family members, it feels so out there. It feels funny to even talk about out loud. It feels awkward to say it on a podcast. The only reason I can say it out loud is because it's happened so often and everyone is marveling in the same mystery. I mean, the teacher called me, the mom called me, and they're like, have you heard of this? I call another parent, and the parent, oh, yeah. And oh, yeah, that happens. Well, have you not ever said anything? Because you never asked. And it's like, oh, gosh, okay. So then you start asking more people, and more people start telling you the same thing. And it's just, but everyone's kind of marveling at the same thing. Well, what does this mean? What do they mean by that? How did they know that? Is that really remote viewing through time, or can they access something or pull down a word and know it? What the heck is happening? And so I think as hard as it can be to caregive 24/7 for someone who has apraxia, I think there is also, if a parent can like relax and lean into it, or a teacher or a loved one, they find this mystical marvel of a world that everyone's trying to unravel and understand together.
Yeah, it's completely mind altering to explore these different things, and very confronting and challenging to like accept them. And the cool thing is you don't have to. Like you get to just see, okay, there's examples of this,
Hmm.
many of them, and different examples of precognition, clairvoyance, clairsentience, psychometry, which is like holding objects and having information about where they came from or their
Yeah.
past. Dream communication, which is something we talked a bit about before starting this podcast, that you had an example of recently, I think, through studying someone
Yeah.
with their dream.
Hmm.
I'm curious for you to touch on that one
Hmm.
and how dreams reveal, because again, we can study the neural correlates in different brainwave
Hmm.
states going from alpha,
Hmm.
beta, theta, and how in deep sleep and REM sleep, it's interesting what happens neurologically, but
Hmm.
then also what we get access to information that we did not get exposed to, but appears in our consciousness that we can
Yeah.
start to pay more attention to. And there are some more obvious examples that pop up. And so, do you want to share anything about that one?
Yeah. So as far as the dreams go, I mean, this happens again quite a bit, but in episode 8 of the Telepathy Tapes, which people should listen to in order, but in that one in particular, we focus on, actually, it's that young man I was just talking about, Kyle, and he's in England, and his mom, and he never learned to spell. And his parents, I mean, his mom had no idea he had any musical ability. And this comes back to the dreams, which is, I have to give this backstory. And when he was 20, they put him in a music therapy class for the first time. Well, it turned out he had perfect pitch. He could play almost any song. He had like this whole database of songs, and they don't know how. And he could play the keyboard. And then he started to develop that he could write music. And I asked, Caroline, well, how on earth does he write music if he's can't speak and isn't on the letterboard? And she's like, well, often he'll come to me in dreams. And the first time it happened, it was way when he was young, 6, 7, 8, something like that. And he'd come to her, I think, to tell her he needed antibiotics, not probiotics, some medical thing. But the way he got her attention in the dream was to get her into lucid dreaming. And so what I mean by that is, like, lucid dreaming is when you are in a dream, but you know you're dreaming. And she thought she was just in a dream. And then Kyle started like doing something with a playing card. And then he turned like a, I don't know, ace of clubs or something into like a snowflake, and then looked through it. And it was all jarring enough that he kind of woke up, and then he started speaking to her. And she's like, oh my gosh, Kyle, you're speaking. I can hear you. And he's like, yeah, mom. So I can speak in our dreams, but this is what you need to know. And he told her something, and that was amazing. And then she woke up the next day, maybe a few hours later, and thought, okay, it was a dream. And then, but Kyle came to her at the kitchen table and was like nodding, and she's like, okay, okay. And then he like went and got an ace of clubs, and then she's like, oh my gosh, okay, all right. And then so after that, he could get her into a lucid dream state, but he has to do something really weird to help her get there. Like he'll open an umbrella really quick in front of her face in the dream, or put an ice cube in her mouth, something that like brings her into this dream state. And when there, they can talk. And she's like, I know his voice. It's wonderful. And she's like, he'll often tell me something like, even though I love ketchup in the real mom world and I eat it all the time, like, you have to stop giving me ketchup. It's so bad for my system. So please don't give me any more ketchup. And she'll be like, okay. So this is the type of stuff of how he went along for a long time. 20, he starts learning music. And then he would come to her in a dream and be like, this is the melody. These are the lyrics. You have to write it down. So she'd wake up, and as fast as she could, she'd start writing the lyrics. And he would sit there and go, yep, yep, or nope, nope, if it was good or bad. And so she would kind of get the right sense. And then she would play the music, and he, yep, yep, nope, nope. And then so she kind of was like, I think this is right. But she ended up, connecting him with a music producer so that they could just jive together in the studio. And she said if the music was going the right place, he would like get into a flow state, like so many creatives talk about, where he could play it out and add to it and whatever. And if it was bad, he'd just go catatonic. He would just forget it, like just gone. And then if the flow would come back, then he would like come to life again. And so she's like, through dreams, I think they've written 2 or 3 albums. And it's so unbelievable to hear. But when I was in England, we filmed him doing a concert. And there he was, like up in front of all these people, an individual who cannot speak, but can sing and write and play and writes music through dreams. So it's remarkable. And like you brought up something right before this about, clairvoyance and mediums and et cetera, et cetera. And I think throughout history, there have been so many frauds and so many charlatans. I think for so many people, it's so easy to dismiss this stuff because it's like, well, people fake it and they lie, and they have.
Yep.
There's frauds all over, and there's people exploiting stuff to make money. And it's so sick and gross because it's often exploiting people in their most needy moments. But there are also really, really good psychics and mediums. But I think what makes the non-speakers such the most beautiful, unassuming like messengers of this is there's nothing to gain. They're not saying this for money. They this will hopefully, if everything goes well, will change. But right now, there's not much agency to have a job, to make money, to have social media, to date and get married, to have a friend group, to be popular, to have anything ego-driven that's meaningful. And it takes so very long to write a few sentences. It can take 2 hours to write something profound. That the idea that individuals who have nothing to gain, nothing to show for, are making this up on a worldwide scale it's just ridiculous. And so I think what is resonating with people is so often these gifts come in a form of someone who could be cheating you, who could be lying, who could be profiting from this, faking you out, taking advantage. And for the non-speakers, that is so far from the case. I mean, I think the ethos of every non-speaker I have met is love and transparency, kindness, connection, deep and utter forgiveness for how people have treated them. And it's almost like our loss if we don't listen to them. But it's like there's really 2 options. They're either all telling the truth or they're all lying. And it's not the other one. It's not the latter,
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because, again, there can be real individuals who have these capacities, and there are a lot of individuals who want to capitalize off of people's belief in it and don't have an authentic connection. But there are gifted individuals, and I think experiencing that firsthand and witnessing it firsthand is the most transformative thing.
Yeah.
Because some people write off, certain things to coincidence. That the biggest mystery would be if no coincidences didn't happen at all. It's actually normal that there are some, but you're giving such a meaningful repetition in these studies where it's statistically significant 95+% of times. And so that's helping satiate our intellect in different things. But there is this interesting 3-stage kind of process throughout any evolution of paradigm that I believe Schopenhauer is first.
First, it's dismissed, then it's ridiculed, then it's self-evident.
Yeah. So what is it? First, it's
all truth goes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. Third, it's accepted as self-evident.
Where are we at on that spectrum here?
Well, I think we're darn close to self-evident. I mean, ridiculed, I think families have been dealing with and teachers for a long time. And not just in the non-speaking community. Anyone who's saying they have telepathy. Come on. I mean, that's completely been ridiculed. I mean, I think Rupert Sheldrake really lived through a lot of the violent opposition of saying this stuff is real and true. Another one is Dean Radin, who is the chief scientist at the Noetic Sciences, which was founded by Edgar Mitchell, an astronaut, to look into consciousness. Dean Radin has, through his labs and a lot of the research they've done, they've replicated these studies over and over and over and over and over again. And when you look at the metadata over time, it's just remarkable. But so many of these individuals that were the pioneers were violently opposed. And we have certainly been violently opposed. Like, I remember the first negative article that came out. I was like, what? this is like so earnest. Everyone involved in this, I could not believe it. I was like, this is controversial. Like it felt so personal because I couldn't believe it. And then it was just like, oh no, this is just what's going to happen. Of course, this is the violent opposition to something new and paradigm shifting and scary, and that's meant to happen. But this is why I think the table has turned, is because it is being seen as self-evident. So many people are having their lives, I think, changed or opened up by what the non-speakers and those who love them are sharing. And people are realizing there's no gain in this for these individuals, except for they just want to understand why this is happening, And I think we are actually living through a paradigm shift. And I think it's amazing. And it's like the public is ready for it. And the non-speakers are going to lead the way.
Yeah, it's fascinating because we live in a time where information and these studies can be spread at the blink of an eye so quickly. And when you look throughout history and you look at heliocentrism and what happened to individuals there, where they were basically put in prison for those understandings and beliefs, to germ theory of disease, to the
Yes.
abolition of slavery, it took a long time to go through that process
Yeah.
of becoming self-evident. And now things can move a lot quicker. But it is fascinating to see how that repeats throughout history.
Yes.
Anytime there's an evolution of understanding about reality, it is ridiculed and violently opposed until it becomes obvious and self-evident.
Yeah.
And we're at that precipice now, which is exciting.
Yeah. I think we really are. I mean, even meditation was considered fringe and out there just 30 years ago, right? Like acupuncture, like doing something like that. It's like, how would you, well, it doesn't work. You put needles in your, like these things, like so much in our world that people are like, it works. I don't know why it works or how it works, but but you're right. In terms of scientific breakthroughs throughout history, anyone can look it up. Just look up what has been ridiculed, like violently opposed and ridiculed as a scientific breakthrough. And there's many, 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 many that are now self-evident.
Where does this put us? For the average listener of this podcast, we're exploring how we potentially live in this vast field of consciousness where we all have latent capacities and ability to be able to have clear insight and extrasensory perception that's not coming through our immediate sensory experience. So what do you think about how this relates and translates to our experience, to people that are listening that have varying degrees of awareness of their connection?
Yeah.
And of course, we mentioned earlier, it's easy to contrive this and try to be special. Like we have to examine our own desire and need for specialness when exploring the authentic connection about this. But yeah, where does that place the rest of us?
Yeah. I mean, what I would tell people is, yes, these non-speaking individuals have a heightened ability that seems to be really remarkable, at least most of them. But we all have these abilities. You don't have to go, pay for someone to help you with this. It's not magic. This is nothing new. We are rediscovering something that I think has always been there. And actually, if you were to go look into a lot of the ancestral writings, talk to people who are really familiar with some tribal traditions, this stuff is all still happening in there and completely understood to be a part of the human experience. We've just forgotten through various technologies, if you will. I mean, even if you think of like language and writing and phones and computers and all of these as, quote unquote technologies or innovations, it's taken us away from like our basic living in the moment and being fully, truly present. And when you are in that fully present moment, you can perceive more of your world and connect more deeply with everything and everyone around you. But I hope, and I think it is happening, people are starting to realize I can do this too. And there's example, one of the most, I've heard this over and over talking to scientists, one of the most obvious and evident forms of telepathy every day is telephone telepathy. We shrug it off, but it's pretty clear. Often it'll be like, I was just thinking about you and the phone rang, or like, I was just thinking my first grade teacher and someone just like, and then she texted me, like the weirdest things happen to people. And that's like a quick moment of it, right? But we can all tune into this. It's just, there's a current and it's not loud and it's not obtrusive. I think this current of like the connection, where if you really try to find it in your body, and it's the easiest way to do it is through meditation, of course. But you can tap into that. And there is remote viewing classes that many neurotypical people do that was utilized by the CIA. There's a great book by Annie Jacobson about the declassified CIA documents on, I think it's called Phenomena. And that was about that program. So you can learn remote viewing. Like we were just at a school for season 2 yesterday, and it's called the intuition process. And they teach kids to see blindfolded, and they can write and do puzzles and everything with a blindfold on. It sounds bonkers. I've now watched it in England. I just watched it in Los Angeles. It is real. It is real and it's happening. And the kids that were doing this were saying it's so great because it turns on your intuition in all these other ways. One of them is helping to find missing people. Another girl was able to save someone's life by saying, "You're about to have a heart attack. You must go to the hospital." And he was about to have a huge, massive heart attack. Another girl asked her family to leave the house because she knew something bad was going to happen. The family gets out of the house and it exploded. It exploded from a gas fire or something. And they're still trying to figure out what happened. So these were neurotypical kids. And so this stuff is possible. We can tap into it. The younger you start, I think helping kids like tap into it, the better. But none of this is goofy. And I think that if you were to talk to a really well established, well respected medium like Laurel and Jackson, I mean, her message to everyone was, you could do this too. You could do this too. You can tap in. You can do it. And I think that's what many of the real deals will tell you. You can do this as well. You don't need me. But it's in all of us, and we just have to remember.
It's fascinating to extrapolate this as to our own human journey, how intuition and our connection to these deeper knowings can guide our life in ways that are more fruitful for us in the world and aligned with our own true harmony and nature. Um, Something I wrote was like, when you get quiet, what needs to be heard will get loud. And if you don't get quiet, that noise will rule your life unbeknownst to you.
Hmm.
And I'm curious in your own journey, like you're pioneering and stewarding and supporting a lot of this coming to light in an amazing way, and that positions you uniquely. And I'm just curious how this has refined your own understanding about your own internal connection and how you've been on this own intuitive path from first hearing a podcast with Dr. Powell on it to doing studies to now the podcast season 2 coming soon and the documentary that's going to be coming out. Like you're on a wild journey, and I'm just curious about like your personal path and how you've been relating to this all.
Well, I think surrender was when it really started to take over. Like when I first was, kind of unfolding this world, I thought, okay, this has to be a docu-series because it's so big and so massive, and it has to go this way, and it has to be here, and it has to go on this network, and it has to. I had like it all mapped out based on what I thought needed to happen. And none of that happened. Like when I pitched the docuseries, people said it was a great idea, it's beautiful, whatever. It doesn't fit our mandate. What is it? What genre is it? And it was like no's across the board. And actually this morning I realized like it was almost a year ago that I was like crying in my backyard because I'm like, this is over. I worked so long on this. I have no money to go make a documentary. I can't do a docuseries without someone backing it. Like it's over. I failed everyone. I mean, that was really what I felt like. I failed everyone, and I couldn't get it off the ground. And then it was like a lightning bolt. Well, no, I remember going on a walk with my friend who's very Buddhist and wonderful. And I was in the moment of just devastation and just self-dejection. I just had to feel bad for a minute. And she's like, what's in store for you is so much bigger than what you have in store for yourself. You have to let go. Like what you were envisioning was so minimal and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, this is the most important story in the world and it's never going to go anywhere now. And she's like, you're just surrender. And I remember going home that day and I like just said to the universe, okay, I surrender. Like I clearly am not the right person to tell the story. I'm clearly not I don't know how to do this. So take it back. I'm so sorry. And let it go however you think it should go now. Like I'm out because I didn't do it right. I must have failed somehow. And like the next day, it was like, I have to make a podcast. The podcast, that's the way to do it. And I remember calling all the families and being like, okay, that were involved at that moment. And even Dr. Powell, and I was like, it has to be a podcast. And people were like, that's a really bad idea, Kai. You have to see spelling to believe it. You have to see the telepathy to believe it. Like, how is this going to be a verbal podcast? These individuals don't speak, for God's sake. Like, yeah, we can make a podcast. And I was like, I don't know, but I just know this is the right way. Like, it has to be a podcast. And I think everyone in my life was like, this is bonkers. But not everyone, but most people. But it was so clear to me, like, this has to go this way. And it wasn't me then. It was something else, like, driving through. And it was literally the second I was like, I surrender. I can't do it. It's not me anymore. Like, I had it all wrong. And the second that surrender happened, it was just like, whoop. okay, great. Thank you for surrendering. Now, this is how it's meant to go. And it really felt like it came from somewhere else. And the thing is, every movie I've ever written, every story I've ever written, I sit and I outline and I read it and I research. And it's like, I remember sitting down at the computer for episode 1, and it was just like, and it's like every single quote, I had it all. It was all on my drives from all the years of putting, it was like all just like, it like told itself. It was like the clay like built. And then I remember just getting really excited and calling some of the families, like, this is what's going to happen. And they were like, well, what's the episode 2 and what's the arc? I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, why don't you know? I'm like, because it's going to write itself. I actually don't know. And they're like, what type of director are you? Because I always know. I always write the outline. I always write the story. I always know. And this was truly like, I don't know what's going to happen in every episode, but I know it's going to flow. And I knew like, we have to cover spelling. We have to cover the dreams. We have to cover the hill. We have to cover the friendship. We have to cover the struggle. Like, I understood what had to happen. I could feel it. Like, I felt the form in me, but I just knew that it would form itself if I just surrendered. And so that's what I've learned now is every time I start to think too much about something, I'll be like, lead with love, let love guide you, only do it for love, check in with the families and teachers and non-speakers all the time and see if they're happy. And if those 2 things are good, then I will just get out of the way. And it works. And I have checked in with the non-speakers quite a lot because the spotlight is on them and they feel it and they know and they're like, keep freaking going. So that's cool because I think they see what's in store in a way I can't. So surrender.
That's so powerful. When we have that like tight grip and that control and unending need for certainty, it's like we can't, our signal isn't as clear to receive and surrender to what life wants for us. We're always in this perception of what we want from life.
Yeah.
And that's just a powerful reminder, I think, for us all who desperately want something, yet life is trying to give us something that's even greater than our comprehension.
Yeah.
Because all of our desires are fundamentally informed by past events and knowledge that has happened in the past. And so it's like, if life is going to unfold greater than you could imagine, then you need to be willing to let go in that space. And that's just so cool how it was literally one day and then you had this intuitive hit and who knows what came from it. But from that point, I mean, how many months after was that moment from the eventual?
It's really weird. I love that we're talking about this right now because this morning I was sitting with my family and the kids were like, what did we do last year for 4th of July? Because, it's like this Friday, it's in a few days. And then I think my daughter's like, you were really upset, remember? Because like, you didn't get your TV show and then you thought the world was over and we were going to sell our house because we were like there's no hope left for any, like they were like, remember this being like super tragic. And I was like, oh my God, like last year, this time, like I was just starting to work on episode 1 of a podcast, like not knowing what I had a pillow fort in my bedroom. But like what my kids remember from last 4th of July, I was like, hot mess. Like I was a hot mess, And it's just so weird to think what can happen in a year. But the fact is, it was like, I didn't do anything but surrender. I mean, I think, so.
Yeah, it's interesting you say it like that because from the outside in, it looks like you're doing a lot because you are, like your body's moving in places and you're coming up with things. But the Taoist maxim that I say a lot on this podcast that I love, it says that the master does nothing, yet leaves nothing undone. And it's like, there isn't this sense of I or doership behind a lot of the actions. And that's when I feel like we're actually living in accordance with surrender. And where then in less than a year's time, it's like things completely radically change and we lose sight of like how fast they actually do because we're in our day-to-day experience. But like months back, a year back, it's so cool just to see and hear your own personal journey. And I'm just so happy for you. And I'm just so enamored with what's happening within the culture at this point. And it's a testament to what happens to when you listen to that own internal voice and guidance, what that can do to culture, society, humanity. And we've seen that throughout varying degrees when thought leaders have this conviction or understanding and they are led by love in a deeper way. And that can radically transform humanity. And we're in a time where we need that more than ever now. And in any way we can get it, to not have such pervasive illusions around separation and in groups and out groups,
Oh, yeah.
but like cohesive conversations and things that bring our understanding of how we're actually more all one and connected
Yes.
at deeper levels. And so I'm stoked for you. And this is just all exciting.
Yeah. And one thing to end on, because you were talking about love, and I thought, what, people might wonder what is love. And I remember asking a non-speaker once, like, what is love? And it was so quick. Anything that unifies. And so I think like that's a great thing to think about as you leave. Like, is this moment, is this decision, is this action going to unify or divide? And if you can like live your life with unifying in mind, then you're living a life of love, right? So it's a good way to go
Yeah.
forth.
Yeah. No, it's a powerful note to start to wrap up on. I think as these understandings are becoming more self-evident in that paradigm of the evolution of paradigm that we talked to earlier, as these things are coming more and more to the light and people understand them and have their intellect satiated and the legitimacy of the repeatable studies and experience and hear more of these stories, which I encourage everybody to go listen to the Telepathy Tapes and season 2, which is going to be, when do you think is going to?
Probably October,
Okay.
September, October of this year.
Okay, so we're close by. Yeah, it's exciting to see what's upcoming in that whole world. And yeah, this was amazing. So fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So fun.
Yeah. Do you have anything else on your heart that you want to share about anything that we talked about that you haven't touched on? And then also where people can stay connected with you and your work?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest message to share will be the film, which is coming out. Hopefully, it should be wrapped up here film-wise August, and we will have that released early next year at some point. So that's the most exciting thing. The telepathytapes.com, of course. We're on Instagram and TikTok and all the things at the Telepathy Tapes. But I think people need to know the talk tracks is out there because it is as fun, I think, well, at least people tell me it is, as the Telepathy Tapes because it's exploring consciousness and so many of these questions with so many beautiful stories. Some dealing with, other stories of non-speakers and some not. But I think people find all these threads really weave together in a beautiful way.
Amazing.
So, thank you.
We'll leave links down below where people can stay connected with you and find all these resources. Thank you so much. It was so fun to connect. I'm excited to chat more offline.
Likewise.
And yeah,
Awesome.
amazing. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning to this episode of the Know Thyself podcast. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts on this episode, what it's inspired and created all within your life, hopefully. And let us know. Until next time, be well. Take care.